Hi, everyone. Today we have Dave Devereaux, and he is a husband, an uncle 11 times over, and a dog dad. He grew up in a traditional home, traditional, mom, dad, and three older brothers. He graduated from UCLA and went on to get his MBA from Loyola Marymount University. His career has been in software sales and sales leadership. In 2018, he became a small business owner. Dave is also in recovery from alcoholism. In 2007, he entered the Betty Ford Center for a month of treatment. And in 2014, he would spend 9 months in the Salvation Army Men's Rehabilitation Center after finding himself homeless because of his addiction to alcohol. During his time at the Salvation Army, David had a spiritual experience that changed him forever. Thank you so much for being here, Dave. And if you can tell us your story, we all love to hear it.
Thank you, Amalia. Thanks for inviting me. As we've talked about, my story is not necessarily a near-death experience in the way that I've seen in your videos. But for me and for my family and friends, it wasn't a near-death in terms of a physical life, but it was near-death in my spiritual, emotional self. And as you said, I grew up in kind of a normal household. So a lot of the friends that have known me from high school and college, when I tell them what happened to me, they're blown away because I was always this high achiever. I went to college and graduate school and all that, and I was very successful at work. But it didn't matter because underneath all of that, I was riddled with fear and anxiety. And it came to a head in 2013. I got in trouble for the last time with the law. I was looking at 8 charges against me, 2 of which were felonies. And so I ended up in the Salvation Army. I was court ordered, but I was asking to go in, and then the judge ordered me in. So while I was in the Salvation Army, I went in there in January of 2014. And I'll give a backdrop of this in a little bit, but I was really at the end of my rope. I had made a lot of money in my career, and I lost all of it. The last asset I had was my automobile, and I sold it to pay back my mother, who paid for the lawyer that I had to hire, the last lawyer. And then I paid some whatever bills I could afford to pay before I went into rehab. And I was so full of fear. I had a wonderful woman who I was dating, and she's now my wife, thank God. But I was so afraid to lose her. I was afraid about what I was going to do. I just shot my credit, was destroyed. My life had crumbled around me, basically, that life that we try to build because of my addiction. And so I was bouncing around before I went into the Salvation Army. I was bouncing around little motels in Orange County. It was bad. I ended up, my oldest brother allowed me to sleep on his sofa for a few weeks before I entered. So I find myself in this place with 90 other guys. Some guys are hiding from the law. Some people are like me, trying to overcome addiction. And I'm probably the only college educated person in there. And a lot of tough guys in there, which made it even more fearful. And I remember I'm, like sorting clothes and all this. It's like, how did I get here? A year ago, I was at a $1,500 a night resort in Cabo San Lucas, and now I'm homeless in the Salvation Army, working to earn my food and my bed, my room and board. And so I did nothing else, but I went back to I was raised a Catholic, and I went back to my roots, and I prayed. That's all I could think to do. And day in and day out. And as I started to just kind of surrender the idea of being there, I was in doubt if there was even a God. I'm praying and praying, but I wasn't really feeling anything was listening. And I remember one day I looked up at the roof of this warehouse where I was working, and I was, is there anything listening to me? You know, and I was in just such desperate times. And that evening I went to a meeting for a 12-step meeting, and there was a little a coincidence that happened to me that my mom had given me a prayer card before I had gone in, and it fell out on the ground out of the AA book. And I picked it up and I read the prayer, and it like spoke to me, like it was an answer to that prayer earlier in the day when I was yelling up at the roof. So that gave me a little bit of hope, and I like to call them God shots. It was a little breadcrumb, from God, like leading me, keep praying. And March 14th of 2014 was the day where I had my spiritual experience, and I call it my sip of heaven. I was praying, and all I was doing was praying in my head. A lot of people, I've seen in your videos, there's one gentleman talking about the Lord's Prayer, and that's all I could think to pray that day. And it was a little before Easter. It was during Lent, and I just was repeating it over and over. And then I was taking the trash out. I was what they call a runner at the Salvation Army. I would gather all the trash from different sections of the warehouse, and I'm next to this dumpster, and I'm saying the Lord's Prayer. It's about 1:00 in the afternoon. We'd had lunch, and in a matter of an instant, I just felt this overwhelming. I looked up in the sky, but I felt like I was looking at the sun. I think, it was like this overwhelming feeling of love that just poured all over me, and it felt like a bucket of forgiveness and love and joy, and all of that fear about what I was going to do when I got out of that place just lifted. And I was just in tears. I'm a grown man standing next to this trash dumpster, and I can only imagine what it looked like outside of me. And it felt like it lasted about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm sure it was like an instant. And I was just crying. I couldn't stop crying like a baby. And I have this empty trash can on rollers, and I'm just sobbing. And I felt like I've taken alcohol to excess and some drugs, and I'm not proud of it, but this was better than any drug or drink I've ever had in my life. This feeling I had, I call it my sip of heaven. And it was like a huge spiritual hug, and it just poured all over me. And it felt like, even though the moment was over, it carried with me. And I started going back into the warehouse, and this guy's like, "Are you okay, Devereaux?" And I just blurted out, I'm perfect. And I don't know why I said I'm perfect at the time, because I'm not perfect, but at that moment, everything in my world was perfect. And from where I was that morning to where I was then, I felt this knowing that everything was going to be okay. It was no longer like a faith or a belief. I knew my life, I had a purpose. And that's what I think everybody seeks in life, is a feeling of a purpose. And I knew my purpose. My purpose was to help somebody else now. It wasn't all about me anymore. And I know it's talking a lot about like an instant, but this clarity came to me in that instant. And I knew there was a God, a creator. I knew, so that prayer was answered. God revealed himself or herself to me at that moment. There was no doubt in my mind. And then I started, I was like, I finished the day, and I was just telling everybody about this, and I think they thought I was a little nutty. But the craziest thing that happened, I started reading about addiction. I was reading the Bible. I was reading as much as I could read, well, because I still had 7 months in this place, in the Salvation Army. And the craziest thing is, all these little experiences happened to me after that moment. And I felt this yearning inside of me to try to get to know God, and to get to know what happened to me to get me into this place, what took me out, and then what happened to me on March 14th 2014. What was that? I knew it was God, but why did it happen to me? Anyway, so I just started doing a lot of prayer and meditation. And when I was younger, I was always taught how to pray and, all this, it's like you're doing all the talking, but I learned to just be quiet and be still and listen. I know it sounds a little nutty, but to listen for that quiet, still voice. And I started to do that. And I started to get direction on what to do. Sometimes it was don't do anything. I kept hearing, get to know me. And it's not like this audible voice. It's hard to explain it, but I really believe that it was the Holy Spirit that hit me over the head, hit me over my whole being. And I had this conscious contact with the spirit that created everything and that helps us through life. If we listen to it, I think oftentimes we get distracted by work, relationships, and all this stuff, and we forget to just be still and quiet and listen for what God wants with our life rather than trying to impose our will upon our life. Because I messed up my life. I'll go back now before I got in, but I was raised, as you mentioned, in a quote unquote traditional household. Mom, dad, 3 older brothers that picked on me and loved me and supported me. We played sports, and I was a good student. I was a high achiever, as I said, and it was expected to go to college. And I partied in college, but it wasn't anything out of the ordinary. I was a weekend partier, even into my 20s. I got in trouble in my 20s. I had my first DUI. In 1992, and I woke up for a time. But what I did is I ended up going back to school to get my MBA because I thought maybe that was a wake up call to achieve higher, do something else. And so I built a good career I got my MBA. I got into sales management, and I made a lot of money. I did a lot of things that the world sees as successful. But inside, as I got older, I also got more fearful, like I was a fraud. I had this, this voice inside my head, like it's going to go away. And it's weird because I had that after my spiritual experience. I had the positive, loving voice of everything's going to be okay. Before all of that happened, I started this negative voice in my head started to creep in. And, it's the voice of evil or whatever it was. It made me think I was like a house of cards. It was going to all come crashing down, which ultimately it did. But I think in ways it's because it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. So as you mentioned, in 2007, my father passed away. And right afterwards, I ended at the Betty Ford Center. And because my wife at the time, I was drinking too much and it was starting to impact our relationship. And I remember my father used to say, go out and help somebody whenever I was anxious. I was like, what is that? I can't help anybody. But when he died, the wheels came off and I ended up in the Betty Ford Center, and I came out of the Betty Ford Center. And that's when my trouble really started. The trouble with the law. Because all of a sudden, you have this solution to life. In my case, it was drinking. I had created a life that was successful, and yet whenever I got anxiety and fear, I would sort of wash it away with a couple of drinks. A couple of drinks turned into more, and then pretty soon I found myself drinking almost every day, drinking at weird times of the day, and that's what led me into the Betty Ford Center. And then after I got out of there, because now everybody knows you're an alcoholic, Dave, you can't drink anymore. It's like a cat and dog thing, I'm a stubborn person by nature. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. And so for the next 7 years, it was a battle. My whole recovery was a battle. I would relapse. I'd try to get back into like recovery through AA and things. And it was just a struggle. Um, I went to 2 other rehabilitation facilities and nothing seemed to work. And I went through a divorce. That relationship ended in 2011. Um, I actually had a period of sobriety starting in 2011, and that's when I met my wife. Um, so there were periods of sobriety, but not recovery. I was never recovered because I never treated that underlying fear and anxiety that I had, and it was and it was a fear and anxiety that, like I said before, like I was a fraud. I wanted everybody to like me, accept me, and so I built up my way to combat all that anxiety and fear was to be successful. Because if I'm successful, you're going to like me. I did that my whole life. Um, and in 20, I know I'm bouncing around, sorry, but in 2011, I met Elise, my now wife, and we dated I took her to the family week at Betty Ford, which was terrible because I gave away all the secrets of how to hide drinking and all that. I relapsed in that, I guess it was spring, May or June of 2012. And the next year and a half, it was like the same old struggle, on and off sobriety. And I put her through misery. So here I go again. I'm putting another woman through the misery, right? And it culminated in 2013. Oh, by the way, I would take her on some nice trips, because I didn't want her knowing how sick I was. And my sick mind equated money and success with, hey, he's okay. And I think a lot of alcoholics do that. If you have money, I can't be an alcoholic because I have money and I pay the bills and I get through life. And that's what I was doing. And I was layering it on top of that with some fancy trips and spending a lot of money on her. So she used to say, "What are you, a Saudi prince?" And all the while, I'm running out of money. I sold my house in Palos Verdes to my ex-wife, and I sold out of it. So I was running through all that money, and I'm like piling the fear on internally. And so, but I'm not letting her know. So in the fall of 2013, September, I'm getting kicked out of my little place where I was living in Long Beach. My former sponsor had a little sober community, and I relapsed, obviously. And so I'm like, he had to get me out of there. So that's how bad it was. My old sponsor's kicking me out of his sober living area. So the last of my stuff was packed in my car, and Elise, she was working in a trade show in San Diego, and I hop in the car and I start driving down to San Diego to go meet her at this trade show. And at that time in my life, it was a 50-50 shot. I hate to say this, but whether or not I was drinking and driving, usually I had some trace of alcohol in me, because to be normal, to feel normal, I had to have alcohol in me. So I ended up getting pulled over for DUI on my way to go see her on, I don't even remember what night of the week it was, but it was about sunset, the night that I was supposed to meet her. Police light goes up and behind my window, and I got her on the cell phone, or tried to. And I said, "I'm not going to make it tonight. I'm going to be in jail," because I was driving on a suspended license. I was driving on a suspended. I don't know. The 8 charges were terrible. I had a little baggie full of residue of some other stuff that we mess around with when we're alcoholics to keep us going. It was terrible. So I ended up in another overnight in jail, which was my 8th time in my life. Eight times in jail in about, I don't know, 5 years or something, maybe less. But and that's not the guy that my mom and dad raised. I mean, the guy you're sitting before you here. I mean, to go to jail and, oh my, you've got to be kidding. That's not how I was raised. Anyway, so for the last time I was in jail, and I look at it like God cornered me there, and he said, no more. This is it. Because I could have killed somebody in the many years that I was drinking and driving. I could have killed myself. Um, I'm grateful that those CHP pulled me over. I tell them nowadays, if I see them, I run into the police, or particularly the CHP. Thank you, saved my life. And my car was impounded, and because I had a felony charge, I had sat in impound for a month. A lot of these consequences that God was just sealing the deal for me. You're not going to get your car. You're not going to get out of this one, David. I had a bench warrant, I came to find out, in LA County, because I didn't finish my DUI program for another DUI I had in LA. This is what an idiot I was. I also then, I was supposed to show up for court in San Diego, and I missed it because I got lost because I was drunk. So I ended up bouncing around some motels in Orange County because, like a good alcoholic thinks, I'm going to stay in Orange County. So if I get picked up, they won't find out about my cases. And anyway, just stupid. So I spent some time in Orange County in some little seedy motels as I'm running out of money. I remember my brother came down to take me to a treatment facility to interview with them in Orange County. And then he took me to court. And then on the way home from my court appearance, which I did make, he asked me if I was hungry. Do you need to go to the bathroom? And it's like, yeah, why? It's because we're going to LAX. We're going to the airport from San Diego. He drove me to LAX, put me on a plane, and said that I'm going up to meet my oldest brother, Stan. He's going to pick me up at the other end, and I'm going to go to treatment in Sacramento. So this is how I ended up at the Men's Rehabilitation Center in Sacramento, the Salvation Army. I slept on his sofa for, I don't know, maybe a month or so before there was a space open for me. And then that's what led me to that spiritual experience that I had on March 14th of 2014. I started to say after that experience, I had all these further spiritual experiences. So I graduated almost 7 years ago. It'll be the 23rd of July will be 7 years. Is that right? Yeah, since I graduated. So I was 6 months into my program. You graduate, but I had a court order, so I had to stay 3 months thereafter to fulfill my court order. So there's a period for those 3 months where I'm with these other men, and they're saying, you know, you're planning your exit strategy from the Salvation Army. They're trying to help you think about getting a job. Now, a lot of the guys had, I love blue collar workers and skilled workers with their hands. A lot of them are that kind of, you know, truck drivers and people that work with their construction workers, and they're all like, they go drop off, you know, resumes and applications wherever they want to work. And I go home and I'm looking on, you know, the websites and stuff to look for a software sales position. And every time I do it, I'm like, I don't have a resume that it's riddled with, you know, holes in it now. I just destroyed my resume. So how am I going to get a job? And I start getting this anxiety when I'm trying to look for work. And when I would be meditating and praying, I would hear that voice just say, stop, don't do it. Just get to know me. And I kept going back to these meetings with the guys and the counselors. I'm not supposed to look for work. And they're rolling their eyes. Sure, you're not supposed to. No, seriously, God's telling me not to look for work. Okay, well, look for work, you know. Tell God you're going to look for work. So if you want to pay bills, you're going to find something to do, or you're going to stay here. Anyway, so one day I'm out. I go to a doctor's office to get physical because I want to make sure my liver and everything's good. As I'm leaving, I wanted to go find a watch battery. And I asked the lady at the doctor's office, so is there a place where I can get is there a watch repair store around here? And she said, oh, there's a camera store around the corner. And I thought to myself, that's weird. Why a camera store, watch battery? I didn't. And then I heard that little quiet voice say, go. And I literally remember the moment when I looked up. I'm like, I wasn't seeing anything, but I heard this feeling of nudging me, go. So I went and they said no. And sure enough, there's no watch battery. But they say, why don't you go downtown? And there's a place called blah, 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 whatever it's called. So I went on this goose chase to find a watch repair store downtown. And I went into buildings and offices. And finally, I got into this one office. And they're like, oh, it's down the alley over here. You'd never find it unless you ask somebody. And I said, what do you guys do? And it was a legal software company. And I just asked about, are you hiring? But, well, yeah, we are hiring. We're hiring a salesperson though. Or you know anybody? I said, well, I do, me. And then, so I ended up giving them my resume. I went back to the house and I put my resume together and dropped it off a couple of days later. And I had an interview with them. I had one company that I sent a resume to. I had one interview and I got one job. So that quiet, still voice that was telling me not to do anything, but get to know him. I mean, I was just on cloud nine, and I knew I had so many experiences like that. I've had so many experiences like that where it's like if we tap into that source, the spiritual connection will lead us to become more efficient, I think, in life, and will cut out the clutter and the noise. And so I actually came out of the Salvation Army with a job lined up in my career that I had destroyed before. So, to me, that's a miracle, a little minor miracle. And it wasn't a dream job, but at that moment, the other thing that happened is the owner of that company, I ended up living over his garage, an apartment over his garage, kind of like Fonzie, if anybody's that old. I lived over his garage for several months. And so I had a place to stay rent free and I had a job. And who would have guessed, right? But I was led to this. Now, like I said, it wasn't the dream job. And in fact, I would find myself in my first real challenge of my sobriety, my recovery in that spring of 2015. I came home from a quick little out of town trip, and this gentleman who had me living over his garage said, you got to move out and the company is shutting down for a while. And exactly, I looked like that. What? And so I'm like, now, here we go again. And then probably two nights later, Elise, by the way, Elise, God bless her, she stuck with me through all of this. And we had this long distance relationship, which amounted to 3 years. So she a couple of nights after I lose my place to live and my job, tells me her mom's in the hospital. And her mom has, when she's in the hospital, we're communicating obviously, but she has a cardiac arrest and dies. So now I'm without work, which means without money again. And I thank God my mom lives in Roseville, about a half an hour from where I was living at the time. So I'm 40, whatever I was, 47, rolling back to mom. It's what we all want to do. But I was like, when her mom died, it's like, I want to be there for Elise, the woman I love. And how do I do that? I can't, I don't have any money. I don't have enough for an airfare to go to, her mom lived in Chicago. Elise gets on a plane to go to Chicago, and all I could think to do is pray. And I heard, pick up the phone and make calls. So I called my counselor at the Salvation Army, the guy who had become a dear friend. He still is a dear friend, and my sponsor at the time. And we were all just kind of praying, and they're helping talk me through this. I knew for sure I wasn't going to let this take me out, because that's what I believe, like, my addiction often does. You get challenged with life, and the next thing you know, you find yourself drunk again, or you find yourself high again. And for me, I knew it's a spiritual battle for me, good and evil. And drinking for me is opening the portal to evil. And it takes me to places I don't want to go. And so I made a commitment this time to focus on all the fear that I had about how am I going to be with Elise. for the funeral and help her get through this. Because I'm not going to rerun that time when my dad died and I was a drunken mess and I ended up in Betty Ford. I'm going to live and I'm going to walk through this. And so during the course of this time, I had reconnected with a friend of mine, and he actually calls me out of the blue. And I told him, how you doing? Not so good. I tell him what's going on. And he says, well, Dave, I'll get you there. He's a United Airlines pilot. And he flies buddy pass to Chicago. And so I'm able to go to Chicago. And he did this twice for me. In fact, the second time when I was there, because I lost my job, we were selling her mom's house, and we were able to have lunch together. And he's a college buddy of mine. And I was able to sit down and have lunch with him and thank him. But what another little God shot, a miracle to be able to get me to help Elise through that whole process of her mom. And Elise, my wife, is an only child. So it's not like she had a lot of, she didn't have siblings or another parent. Her dad died in Vietnam before she was born. So her mom was it, that was her family. And so, God, he took care of me and he took care of us, got me back there to help be with her and be present during the funeral and all of the process to get through her mom's death. Then when I came back, I'll fast forward, because in 2016, so I was working a part-time job in recovery. We call them get well jobs. And I did that far too long. I was riding my bike anyway to get to work and back. And it was a retail job. I'm not going to say who it was with. But anyway, in 2016, a buddy of mine asked me, because I was in sales management, he asked me to help him interview for a software company. And I was in software sales management. So I did so. And I helped, his name's Dave, he's a dear friend. He's also in recovery. And I just did it because he's a buddy. And I had met him in Long Beach in that circle of AA folks. And so I helped him put together a presentation for this position. And anyway, I didn't think much of it. I just helped. He got the job. Fast forward 6 months, and he's calling me up. Hey, are you looking for work? And well, yeah. So they had a position open up, same role, and it was in software sales. And lo and behold, I'm pretty prepared for this interview process because I had already helped my buddy out. So I got the job in Aliso Viejo. And that was the other thing. I knew I was getting back to LA or to Southern California eventually to be with Elise. Because I knew in my heart of hearts she was going to be my wife. I just knew it. Anyway, so God took care of getting me a job down in Orange County. And he knows I wasn't quite ready to be with her. He didn't want the distractions, I believe. So I was in Orange County so I could focus on Dave still and get myself solid footing in my recovery. So I worked for this company for a couple of years, and I had the two largest sales deals that they'd done in their 10-year history. And it's weird. I used to get a lot of anxiety around sales, because the quotas and all this, and I didn't have it. I think a lot of that's my desire to drink was removed, but also just the fear and anxiety that I lived with day in and day out. Whenever I sense it coming, I go back to what I learned in the Salvation Army, and that was to pray and meditate and go back to the one source of peace that I know, the source that I know I'm going to be with when I die, because I know there's a heaven. That's what that experience was. I call it my sip of heaven because it was a little insight as in don't have any fear while you're there on earth, because this is going to be eternity for you. So anyway, I made my way to Orange County, and I was doing well at this position. And my brother John, my family, they knew I had changed, and they knew I changed because they were watching me from afar, right, and talking to me. They knew something happened to me, and they're all faithful people, and they believed that their prayers had been answered too. And so John was looking for a passive form of income, and in 2018, he invested in this business and asked me to run it. And so, that's, to me, it was a great opportunity, not only to uh, be involved in a business, which I would kind of always wanted to do, but also to do so with my brother, who was there taking me to court and picking me up. And it's just, and now he's asking me to be in business with him. To me, that was a testament of how far God had taken me and how far my life had changed. And it really was just based on listening to the good voice and making good decisions by listening to the voice of hope and joy and love, rather than that voice of, hey, let's go have a beer, and no. So John asked me to be a part of his business, to run it. And he's entrusted me with a pretty significant investment. And it's been quite successful so far. And and COVID hit last year, and I tell you, these miracles keep happening. My wife Elise and I were married on February 15th, and it was just kind of a coincidence the way we picked that date, February 15th of 2020, because we were looking at dates later in the spring and summer, and then somehow we landed on February 15th. And had we not, we would have not had a wedding and party and all that. And we came back from our honeymoon, and then the shutdown hit. But our business just absolutely took off because we killed germs in our business. And so this restroom hygiene business that my brother and I were involved with, or that I was running, with the lockdown, we lost a lot of our business early on, and we probably 30% of our revenues came from bars and restaurants. But then we found a whole new world of business from or revenue from businesses that they just wanted to kill germs. And so our revenues grew by about 45% from the point when we lost 30%. So we were actually at a point greater than when we started. Like when I went on my honeymoon, we're about 45% higher in revenues, and we've grown since then. So it's like, talk about being at the right place at the right time. Another blessing for me. And I just feel like I don't have that ongoing fear, like the shoe's going to drop, the other shoe's going to drop. And then, my credit was demolished too. And, but I just kept doing the right thing. And, slowly but surely, my credit came back until the point when last November I was able to get a mortgage. So my wife and I moved into a house in a lovely area on the outskirts of Los Angeles. Anyway, I just look back, and my journey was like this. I kind of lived a normal life of a 20-something, 30-something. I got married at a later age. But I got into an expensive neighborhood early on, and all this, and life was trucking along. And then I just I went off the cliff, and the good Lord rescued me and pulled me up. And it's like I have every hope in the world that I believe so hard in. He has something for me. This is a part of it, right? Because I think we're supposed to help others know that there is more to life than that sorrow and fear that we find ourselves in at times, because we all go through it. In fact, the other day I was getting a haircut. I think I told you this. I was getting a haircut, and I walk in, and I rushed out of the house. These things happen to me all the time. So I heard that little voice, "Go get your haircut now." And I go, and it's not like an audible voice that I hear. I'm not. Some people probably do, but I just hear a nudging in my spirit. So I headed out. I went to some place, and she had time to see me. So I got in my car, sat in her chair, and she's cutting my hair. And she seemed just kind of blue, and I could just pick up on that energy. And it was before the 4th of July. I was telling her how we're getting ready to have a little fourth party and all this, and telling her about my wife, and then she's, "Oh, do you have children?" "No, we just got a puppy." And anyway, she said, "Oh, you never had kids?" And I told her about my previous marriage, just briefly. "No," and I said, "because I'm in recovery from alcoholism, and in many ways, I'm grateful that I didn't subject children to my addiction." And she was like, even got sad at that moment, more so than she was. And she said, oh, my son gets out of jail tomorrow and he's going into treatment. I go, I've been there, both. I've been to jail 8 times and I've been to treatment facilities, at least 4 that I remember. And she kind of had a smile on her face, not a smile yet, but I could see something in her change. It's like, and then she started asking me questions about it. And I just talked to her about, pray, because I believe in prayer. No matter what faith you are, I believe in prayer. I do, because I believe God answers prayers. He doesn't answer them always like we want, but he answers them. And if we're persistent in prayer, those prayers will be answered, and they're going to be better than we want, I believe, the answers. And so as I'm leaving, I'm paying her, and she's thanking me for telling her about what I went through. And I just blurted out, she said, well, about jail. She's talking about, I said, well, I went to jail for you. And I honestly, I wasn't thinking about what I said, which my wife says I don't think all the time about what I say. Kidding. But I said, I went to jail for you. And I don't know why I said it, but now I do, because it's one of those things I left and I go, oh, now I know why I said it. And because I really did. I went to jail for her. I didn't want to go to jail, but what I went through was for people like her. And it wasn't necessarily just the addict, but maybe it's the family of the addict. The person that was like my mom, praying every night that hopefully I get home safe. She didn't want to get that phone call from the police or the worse, and those people that suffer around the addict. I know far too many people that have died of the disease of addiction through OD, or accidents, and it's awful. And her son is at that place where I was in 2013, 2014, and where you're hopeless. And I just I asked her, just would you just do me a favor and just pray, just keep praying. If nothing else, just keep praying and have hope, because that story is not over yet. And so that's the whole, I think, with any of these experiences that, where you're talking to people or with me, it's about giving someone else hope to get through this minefield of life, because it's hard. And there's nobody's ever been promised an easy life. I had my oldest brother, Stan, who took me in when I was at my end of my rope. Unfortunately, he died in 2018 of a glioblastoma. We found out about it in January of that year, and he died in by June 1st. And, I was praying for the miracle. And I don't, we don't always like the outcome, because I wanted him to live. But I saw in my brother's eyes, as he was a man of faith too, there was a peace in his eyes that I had never seen in most people, that like he knew where he was going and he was ready. I mean, if the Lord called him home, he was ready to go. And I saw that, and this energy about him, he put me at peace. And I remember as he was dying, I mean, his testimony in the way that he could be an example. He was praying for other people. He had a prayer list for people. As he's dying, he has a prayer list, because he figured that's the only thing he could do, because he couldn't go out and do any. His physical capabilities were gone. And I also bring that up because that's another struggle, a challenge that I went through in recovery. That was probably by far the hardest, watching the demise of my own brother. And none of my family ever questioned me once about drinking. Are you okay? They never questioned it once. And I had the opportunity to thank his family at his funeral, in front of a big crowd. And I had people coming up to me, thanking me for sharing about my story, because it has to do with my story. They took me in. Just, we don't know who we're going to touch. And Amalia, you don't know who you're going to touch with these videos, right? I mean, you can save somebody's life if they're in the depths of depression. And all I know is that I am so grateful to have had that experience that completely altered me at my core. I go to parties and I don't even think about drinking anymore, because drinking really wasn't my issue. It wasn't my problem. It was the fear, anxiety, and and all the stuff under it. That's the drinking just was a way to get, it was my solution, actually. It was my solution to life until it became a problem to life. But anyway, that, I'm grateful for people like you that help put these stories out there so that so that the hopeless can find some hope in life, and there's a lot of it with COVID, people shutting down, and our rates of addiction and suicide went up. And I think in some way hopefully these videos will help, that there's more to life than this life, right? There's eternity. So thank you, Amalia.
Thank you, Dave. I do have 2 questions.
Yes.
That was incredible. Thank you. I have to absorb that. It's amazing. So my goal is anxiety, because I had anxiety for maybe 18 months, and I could feel there was something wrong with my body. It couldn't just be mental. I mean, I could tell you my incredible struggles, but I should be able to handle it. I should be able to handle it. And I really struggled every day. So that's why I started watching videos like this, and then wanting to find more people like you to ask these 2 questions. And one is, where do you think that anxiety comes from? Why do we have it? Is it nutritional? Is it mental? I mean, you came from a normal, quote unquote, normal traditional family. My other question is, this is what I'm not good at, and I know I need to be good at. How do we listen to that voice? You were told not to look for a job. That makes no sense. That was funny. I mean, and the men supporting you said, yeah, tell God you're going to look for a job. But you were told not to, and you were led right into the job. So those are my 2 questions. If you can talk a little bit about anxiety, how you can help people out there and people like me, and how do you listen to that voice?
Well, I think the first question about anxiety, I think my experience is that in recovery, they talk about the alcoholism being a emotional, spiritual, and physical addiction, right? It's 3 components to the addiction. It's the physical body, genetic, it's emotional, kind of how you're brought up can impact that, and how you respond to your environment. And then it's a spiritual malady. And I think I think it's all 3. And I think that addiction is rooted in anxiety and fear and all that. And so both or all 3 of those elements might be the root cause, right, of depression and anxiety. The diet, right, that could be a part of it. The emotional, how you were raised, the kind of environment you were raised, and what you subject yourself to now, making better choices, going to therapy. I've gone to therapy. That can help with the emotional side of things. And then spiritual, I think we need to have we're all spiritual beings in my belief. And it's only when we can realize or find that we are not, this is not it, that there's something beyond this realm. And we're here for a purpose. Because I think that can take care of those it can overpower the physical and emotional problems. Because I still have emotional issues. We all do. But I have a different perspective on them. Like, I don't blame my addiction on my upbringing at all. I made bad choices in life, so that's on me. Now, a therapist might say, yes, but you moved around too much when you were a young child, and I don't care. I have the tools to overcome that, and anyway, and then diet. I'm not in as good a shape as I used to be. I've started to eat better and take supplements and stuff like that. I think I could probably go find out a little bit how I should eat. I could probably improve, like we all can. And I think getting proper rest and all that, exercise, rest, nutrition, absolutely. That's a part of my recovery, to try to eat right, exercise, and get enough sleep. And when I say recovery, I really look at my recovery as a recovery from fear and anxiety. The addiction part of it, the alcohol is a symptom. I know when the fear and anxiety is coming, I treat that. I don't have any concerns about drinking anymore. In fact, I told people that I'm not an alcoholic anymore. As long as I don't drink, I'm not an alcoholic. I'd still battle anxiety, like we all do, but I pray and I meditate that away. Now, how do I hear the voice? I learned when I was up in the Sacramento area, after I was out of the Salvation Army, I couldn't drive. So I started walking a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, I was walking 7 or 8 miles a day at one point as a supplement to work, because I would take a train or a bus and I'd have to walk a lot. So I started putting like headphones like these in, and it was hooked up to like a music source of music, but I didn't turn on the music necessarily. I just plug them away, and I used to start calling them God walks. I'm going to go on a God walk. Then I just started doing it, not just to get to work or whatever, but I'd go out and go tell whoever I was with. My mom, I was living with my mom for about a year. I'm going to go out for a God walk, and I'd be gone for a half an hour. And it was about connecting, just blocking everything out. And I'm in a zone of just walking and, taking in his creation, right? And trying to block out everything. And there's all these, and I got into a rhythm where I would start with some prayers in the beginning. And then as I wrapped up through some prayers where it was really about turning life over. And then I just get into a listening mode, trying to block everything out. And then I start to hear these little thoughts. I think sometimes I would hear my thoughts. And then sometimes I would start to converse with, it felt like I was conversing with myself, but there were times where that other voice that was I think it's in my head, that would say things to me that were far too wise for me to be saying it to myself. I don't know if that makes sense. Sounds a little weird, but I believe that was like the Holy Spirit, as I call it, or the voice of God talking to me or informing me, giving me guidance. And when I still try to do these God walks or I'll lay in bed, try to block everything out, and just be quiet. I think that's the key. Find a real quiet. I've known people that get up super early in the morning before the world starts its day, at 4 a.m., 4:30 a.m. And what a great time to go on a God walk if it's a safe neighborhood. But because there's not a lot of activity, so it's really, for me, it's when I can block everything out, not have distraction, and then I usually go through a series of prayers to sort of get myself into that mode of meditation. And for me, meditation's about, prayer is talking, right? And meditation's listening. I don't know if that makes sense. That's the way I kind of see it. Did I answer your question?
You did. Thank you so much. The comment I have to make is when I met you at Tommy's birthday party and you shared this story, then and now, I just amazed at Elise. She stuck by you. That's an incredible story, how you both were just destined no matter what you were doing to yourself. That's really significant part of the story, that, wow.
It is.
With you through the hardest parts. That's amazing.
That is a heart of gold, isn't it? And one that I cherish. She's a lovely, wonderful person. And you don't find many people like that, especially in LA. There's all this, in the LA thing where you got to have a lot of money. Women want the guy with the dough and all, and it's like so superficial, really. And I guess she saw something in me that, she hung on to. I don't know. And I believe it was the Holy Spirit connecting us. I think it was God in whatever way telling her, hang on, and what strength and persistence she has to go through all that we went through together, and how she's grown. I've seen it in her, because you don't go through it alone, and that's one of the things they teach at any rehabilitation center. It's a family disease, and you go through it. Not only the process when the person like me is sick, but also the recovery process. And we've had talks about that at times, and I've seen a change in her. You can't, as a person, you're either going to grow or you're going to give up. I think when you're a loved one of an addict, and you're either going to grow together or you're going to grow apart. and thank God we've grown together. And she's a miracle in my life, and I'm grateful for her. And thanks for bringing that up, because that's every bit as important part of this story, because I probably wouldn't be sitting here if it weren't for her, in part, you know. So
Yeah, it was definitely destiny. Incredible. That's an incredible story. Thank you for teaching us so much. You're going to help so many people who hear your story. And I know there's quite a few who already have. And I forgot to mention I'm a hypnotherapist. That's part of why I do this, because anxiety led me to want to help people to become a hypnotherapist. So if anyone wants to reach me for help, anxiety, which there's so many parts of anxiety, my email is growthfactor.org@gmail.com, and I'll put it in the comments. And I forgot to ask you in the beginning if anyone wants to reach out to you. I know people like to be private, so you can think about it. We can put it in the comments if anyone has a
I'm on
question.
LinkedIn.
Okay, LinkedIn. How do they find you on LinkedIn? Thank you.
I think it's not just under David Devereaux.
You spell the full.
Yeah. My last name is DEV like Victor, EREUX like X-ray. And I show up as a franchise president for EnviroMaster Services. So on LinkedIn, or I can give you an email address if you want it.
Whatever you're comfortable with. And is
I'm
it
comfortable with
David on LinkedIn?
David Devereaux on LinkedIn, or Dave Devereaux 67@gmail.com as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
And thank you for Elise too, because I know you were spending some time with her and you took a little pause. So thank you to both of you for your time. And thank you for helping so many people and sharing your incredible story. And I know there's so much more to it, so maybe we can do it again and you tell us more coincidences and more destiny.
Thank you.
Thank you, David.